Yesterday, I asked y'all, who would you like me to break down in a video? I gave you the options of Lad McConkey, MHJ, or Xavier Legette, and the results were overwhelmingly in favor of Xavier Legette. And so in this video, we're going to break down his profile, his usage, how he is best utilized in an offense in terms of his strengths and weaknesses as an athlete, and then break down what we saw from him in his breakout game in Week 4. Let's take a look at who Xavier Legette is as an athlete. When we look at his 40-yard dash, his 4.39 score here is in the 94th percentile, which is really, really good. But because he's 6'1", 221 pounds, that is a very impressive score. It's one thing for somebody that's 5'11", 175 to have a 4.39. This guy is a big wide receiver. And because he's a big wide receiver, his speed score of 119.0 is 98th percentile. That's height and weight adjusted speed. But it doesn't stop there. When you look at his burst score, his 131.0 scores in the 89th percentile. And then you move on to his catch radius of 10.24, that's 88th percentile. You might notice, though, that he didn't participate in the agility drills. There's a reason for that. He wouldn't have performed very well. Just like with DK Metcalf, who I profiled before, as well as Quentin Johnston, he's more of a linear athlete than a fluid athlete in the sense of having a lot of agility. And so in terms of his fit, he is best used as a vertical X wide receiver or in the slot where he's not being asked to run crisp routes per se, but more linear routes like drags, crosses, streaks, fades, routes that don't require a ton of short area agility. And now let's look at his analytics. You might notice that his 1.55 yards per route run is 46th in the NFL. That isn't the best by any stretch of the imagination. But to help contextualize that, look at his target accuracy grade. His 5.8 grade is 63rd overall. And so what this indicates is it's pretty hard to have a high yards per out run rate when your target accuracy grade is terrible. And so that's the reason for his low score there. When we look at his route win rate overall, that's both man and zone combined, his 40.4 score is 72nd overall. But when you look at his win rate versus man specifically, his 36.4 grade there is 39th overall. And so what that tells us is that he's better against man than he is against zone, but he's also a rookie, so he's going to get better. And coming out, he wasn't really the most refined route runner. He was more of a go up and get it vertical wide receiver, much like a DK Metcalf when he first entered the NFL. And so what you'll expect to see from him are curl routes. You'll see some streaks, which we're not going to see in the film I'm discussing here, but you're going to see routes that don't require a ton of precision. And just like DK Metcalf, he's going to start out with a limited route tree, but with hard work, he'll be able to expand that. Let's take a look at his stats through 4 weeks. In week 1, he played 59% of the snaps. This was with Bryce Young at the helm. He finished with 7 targets and 4 receptions for 35 receiving yards with no receiving touchdown. That's a pretty solid week 1, especially when you contextualize that with he was receiving passes from Bryce Young. In week 2, with Bryce Young once again, he dropped down from 59% to 42% of the snaps played and didn't record a target. So pretty bad week 2, although I don't think it's per se more of a him issue as it was a Bryce Young can't see because he's not tall enough issue. Then in week 3, we saw Andy Dalton take over at quarterback. We did see an uptick in production compared to week 2 at least. On 59% of the snaps, he finished with 3 targets, 2 receptions, and 42 yards with no receiving touchdown. I was hoping to see a little bit more production because he's tall enough to run Dave Canales' offense, but you'll definitely take that compared to week 2. In the second game with Andy Dalton, he played 87% of the snaps in Adam Thielen's absence, so that's a massive step up. He had 10 targets, by far the highest he's had so far. 6 receptions, 2 more than he had in week 1, 66 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. For a 19.6 point week in a full PPR, this is what we wanted to see. A good amount of volume and the production to match the volume. Let's take a look at the receiving core as a whole in week 4. Deontay Johnson was the wide receiver 1. That should be expected. He finished with 13 targets, 3 more than Legette, but Legette also had twice as many targets as the next player, who was Jonathan Mingo with 5. And so that's definitely encouraging to see. When we look at the receptions, he finished with only 1 less than Deontay Johnson, despite having 3 less targets. He did finish second on the team in yardage, but he had more than twice as much as the next player under Deontay Johnson. And just like with Deontay Johnson, he also scored a touchdown. And so this is very encouraging to see. It's a big step up from what we saw in weeks 2 and 3. And hopefully he can keep this role in the offense. Now, when we break down his week by week usage in terms of his snap share, rush share, and target share, and then look at his counting stats, in week 1, he saw a 59% snap share. He didn't record a rush, but he had 24.14% of the targets. That's a reasonably high wide receiver 2 level of target share. That was only 7 targets, 4 receptions for 35 yards. But part of that is that Bryce Young was at quarterback, and so the offense wasn't that efficient. In week 2, despite playing 42% of the snaps, he didn't record a rush or a target, and so he gave you straight zeros there. In week 3, he played 59% of the snaps, didn't record a rush, and only had an 8.11% target share, 3 targets, 2 receptions for 42 yards. And so while the target share really wasn't very good, he was very efficient and productive considering that. I mean, on 3 targets to have 2 receptions for 42 yards, if he could have only gotten 9 targets, but still, on a limited target share, you'll take that. And then week 4 is what we really wanted to see. He played 87% of the snaps. He had 2 rushes for 10 yards, and so that was good for a 6.90% rush share. And then when we look at his target share, he set a season high with 25%. They threw 40 targets, and so he had 10 of those, finished with 6 receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. And this is what we want to see from wide receivers like Xavier Legette, who weren't drafted to immediately fill the role of wide receiver 1. We want to see, first of all, consistent involvement, but we want to see gradual increments in their production and their target share. If he can get anywhere near 22 to 25% of the target share consistently with Thielen out, he's going to be an every week starter in a Dave Canales offense with a quarterback that can actually run the offense. And he's going to end up being a really good steal for us in both dynasty and redraft. On this first play, Xavier Legette is lined up at the top of your screen. He's allowed to have a free release. The Bengals are running a match zone coverage here, except nobody matches Xavier Legette. He's running an out route. He's wide open. He didn't run the sharpest route here. It wasn't especially elongated or anything, but it could have been a little bit sharper. You'll see later that he has a very sharp cut, but nonetheless, it's a very good display of his body control, his ability to get 2 feet down, hang on through the process of the catch. It's pretty acrobatic, and for a first catch in this game, it's thoroughly impressive to me. On this play, Xavier Legette's at the top of your screen. He's running a flat route. The Panthers run play action. Andy Dalton mishandles the ball slightly, leading to the pass being about half a second late, which in the NFL is everything. And so what it does is it completely eradicates any ability for Xavier Legette to get yards after catch here, and he gets blown up as a result of it. But from his standpoint, it's still a good display of his hands. Here we have Xavier Legette in the slot. He's running a deep out route. You'll notice that he shoves the defender off of him, but it's relatively subtle. You see the cornerback complaining there. So he gets really good separation here. It's a pretty sharp cut as well. And so that is something we really like to see on film. If he can keep getting away with these little subtle shoves, that is going to help him tremendously. And it's nice to see that Andy Dalton has the accuracy to hit him on these routes. With Bryce Young, his arm strength really wasn't that great. He obviously wasn't tall enough to see over his offensive line. And so plays like this are much less likely to happen unless he happens to be rolling out of the pocket. But with Andy Dalton, I think we're going to see a lot more plays like this in the future. One thing I really like for Xavier Legette is that he's connected to Dave Canales. As you probably know, Dave Canales is a very good offensive-minded head coach. And so one thing that offensive-minded head coaches do is know how to utilize their players to their strengths. And so, what are the strengths of a linear athlete? Getting the ball in space and being able to run very quickly in a straight line. And now, while this isn't necessarily a completely straight line, he gets the ball on a jet sweep, which allows him to get the ball already with a head of steam. He's able to follow his blockers, turn the edge, get about 8 yards here. And so he's being utilized correctly. He's not being asked to do extremely complex double moves. Those are for Deontay Johnson. Let's just get Xavier Legette the ball in space and let him do what he does best, burn past people. If you like what you're hearing and seeing so far, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel. I love doing these film breakdowns, especially of rookies. It seems to be what y'all want to see. And yeah, if you want to see more content like this, like and subscribe. Thanks. The moment we've all been waiting for, Xavier Legette's first NFL touchdown. He's running a drag route here. He doesn't get the most separation, but he gets just enough for the touchdown. He hangs on to it. And there you have it. The ice is finally broken. With Andy Dalton at the helm, we're going to see a lot more of this instead of the zeros all across the board, such as he had in week 2. And you have to be excited that he's being utilized to his strengths in this offense, and he finally has somebody that's competent enough in the sense of physically to actually get him the ball. Here we have the first negative play for Xavier Legette. He's running a curl here, and it's schemed very well. Fortunately for him, Jonathan Mingo is allowed to take an outside release on his route, which delays the flat defender getting to Xavier Legette. The only issue, Xavier Legette is so focused on turning upfield and getting yards after catch that he takes his eyes off the ball, which leads to a drop here. It's a rookie mistake that we're going to see from less polished players. We won't see that too often from MHJ or Roma Dunze. We have seen it from time to time with Malik Neighbors, but he's been so good, nobody cares. And with Xavier Legette, the film here is overwhelmingly positive, so it's definitely nothing to really worry about, but it is something that he's going to have to clean up, because if this persists, it will eventually come to haunt him in terms of his role in the offense. On this play, Legette's at the bottom of your screen. He's running a curl route. He slightly moves towards the middle of the field to make sure he's in Andy Dalton's eyesight. He secures the grab, avoids a defender, avoids a second one, a third. He gets snatched by the ankles after a pretty solid gain after the catch. And this is what we want to see from Xavier Legette, trying to get every bit of yardage possible. It's a tough play, and it's good to see, and it's going to earn him some trust in the offense, and it's going to increase his target share over time if he's able to replicate this success. On this final play we're going to look at here, Xavier Legette's at the top of your screen. He's running an out route. He makes a really sharp cut. He has a lot of separation. The only issue is Andy Dalton noodle arms it and throws it in the ground. From Legette's standpoint, he did everything perfectly. He has no control if the ball is remotely close to him, and he has a really good catch radius too, but no one has a catch radius that good. And so it was an incompletion. Nobody's going to be perfect. We all know Andy Dalton isn't for sure, but he's a definite upgrade from Bryce Young. The offense is going to be much more efficient. The Panthers might win a game, who knows? And as far as Legette's concerned, this is awesome for him. We're going to have plays like this, but we're also going to have plays like the touchdown, the other out route, and we're going to score more points in this offense with him at the helm than with Bryce Young. And so I really like Xavier Legette's prospects for the rest of the season. And hey, maybe there are a couple quarterbacks who step up this year. The Panthers are bad enough, they're able to select one. They can maybe sit him, or at least select somebody that's tall enough to see over their offensive line. And the future is looking pretty good for him as long as they're able to get a decent quarterback long term. All right, so with Xavier Legette, he's a primarily linear athlete. He was compared to DK Metcalf after his combine, which if DK Metcalf was just 2 inches shorter would be an accurate statement. And so, luckily for him, he landed with Dave Canales, who will know how to utilize him to his strengths, and so far is doing so. He's having him run drag routes, out routes, and curls primarily. He even got him involved in a jet sweep. He's taking advantage of his ability to create in space and burn past defenders. He'll probably be on the DK Metcalf plan in that he'll be running 9 routes, curls, drag routes, and out routes, things that don't require the most agility. We'll see if he can expand his route tree. I'm not exactly sure what the upside is in that regard, but as far as his upside as a real-life wide receiver, and especially in fantasy, he has a ton of potential. The only thing from a dynasty standpoint that I would potentially worry about is if Andy Dalton leaves and they're not able to acquire a good quarterback that can run his offense. You'd be surprised. And so that is one potential worry, but The one good thing, though, is they're so bad as a team, at least record-wise, we'll see about rest of the season, that they're likely to be in position to get a pretty good quarterback in the draft if there is one this year, and if not, next year. And so I think the upside for him is really, really bright. We'll have to see if that comes into fruition from a dynasty standpoint, but from a redraft standpoint, we're going to see a lot more upside weeks from him than what we saw with Bryce Young. The offense is going to be more efficient. He's going to grow as a receiver. And it's really good to see that with Adam Thielen going down, he took a big step up and delivered as the wide receiver 2 in this Dave Canales offense. The sky is the limit for him, and don't be surprised if he turns into a DK Metcalf type of player once he develops just a little bit more. With that being said, if you like what you've seen in this film breakdown of him, and profile breakdown really, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.